Hi, and welcome to Writing Essentials with Mrs. Benson. Today, we are going to continue discussing argumentative writing. In particular, we're going to talk about the gathering of evidence through research. The research that we will be implementing today will be focused on the Common Lit website. So, what does evidence mean when you are told to write an argumentative essay and to include evidence to support your opinion? Evidence most often can come from research. So, research is proven facts from a reliable source that help prove your side of the argument. You do not have to always have research, always pay attention to the guidelines and requirements of the assignment put forth before you. However, when you're presenting evidence without research, it tends to not have as much weight and much credibility. If you can prove that Harvard performed a study, that the New York Times has an article from an expert, that you have a published author who's given information about this, it sort of solidifies your argument that much more than you just saying this is general knowledge. So general knowledge works, but research tends to make your argument even better. So what qualifies as good evidence? You want to make sure that you're getting your evidence from a credible source. So a personal blog is not going to have as much weight as something that was published in a nationwide read periodical. Content from the core disciplines is always really valuable and accessible. So if I'm giving evidence and examples from history, from science, from literature, from current events, these are much more widely known and widely accessed. And that goes to my last point there with when you're giving evidence for an argument, the more relatable, the more accessible, the more widely known your evidence is, the more weight your examples will have in your argument. If I'm talking about a very personal experience that involves an activity that not a lot of people are a part of, or an event in my past that not a lot of people have experienced, then that sort of widens the field of understanding and makes it less accessible to my reader. So the more relatable the evidence, the better. The more widely accepted, the better. And as we're constructing an argumentative essay and looking for evidence, your evidence should fall under one of these three categories. And these are the rhetorical appeals that have been coined by Aristotle. And those are appeals to logos, ethos, and pathos. Logos meaning logic, ethos meaning ethics, and pathos meaning emotion. When you're providing evidence, you're wanting to convince your reader of something, and we can convince people by appealing to their logic. It makes sense. By appealing to their ethics, it's the right thing to do, or appealing to their emotions. This is what will make your heart feel good. So keep in mind ethos, logos, and pathos as you're constructing your evidence, and try to have a balance. We certainly want to sit more in the realm of logos than in ethos when it comes to than in pathos when it comes to an academic paper. Think about it. If I'm only using emotional ploys, it doesn't seem to have as much facts and research behind it. So therefore my argument might seem weaker. So keep in mind logos, ethos, and pathos as you're constructing your evidence. So today we're going to tackle a sample prompt. And through this sample, I can sort of walk you through the process of finding evidence. So the sample prompt gives a quote: "Identity cannot be found or fabricated, but emerges from within when one has the courage to let go," by Doug Cooper. So here's the question of the prompt: is identity determined from without, external forces, or from within, internal forces? What determines our identity? Do we determine our own identity? Do other people determine it? Or is it a combination of both of those, ourselves and others? So I will either support, refute, or qualify this claim. Well, before I decide how I feel about it, or I kind of have some initial feelings myself, I want to do a little bit of research to see what evidence is out there for each side. So I'm going to go to the Common Lit website. In Common Lit, they have a library of themes. When I go through the themes, I find the theme of identity. And underneath identity, there are a couple questions. And this one says, what makes you who you are? Ooh, that is pretty close to my prompt. So now, instead of can you change your identity, I'm going into what makes you who you are. Now, according to my grade level, I'm going to click on the resources. And don't be afraid of clicking on other grade levels, but what I would encourage you to do is not go down grade levels, but only go up. So if you're, an 8th grader, I would not go down to the 4th grade options, but I would be willing to go up to the 9th and 10th or 11th and 12th. If you're a 10th grader, I would be willing to go up to the 11th and 12th grade options, but I wouldn't go down to the 5th or 6th, okay? So want to stretch yourself with your options, not necessarily pick ones that are quite a bit below your reading level, all right? So let's say I just try to jump into the 9th and 10th grade options, and this is all about identity. Now I have all these resources. So we have, 12 different resources here that are credible sources. You can see that they come from the realm of drama, informational texts, psychology, satire, science, history. So there's a lot of really powerful pieces here. And I can utilize these documents to help me formulate my opinion on identity and to then use them as evidence in my essay. So I can click on any one of them and decide if this is something I would like to use in my essay. And when you just sort of have the mouse hover over it, it will tell you a little bit about it. So for example, The Nose by Gogol. In this absurd comedy, a Russian official's nose mysteriously departs from his face and then parades around town. So this is a short story, but this will be something about identity. This man's identity, as he transforms into a nose, becomes simply the nose. And so then it becomes, well, is his identity just a nose, or does he have a mind, a soul? What determines his identity? So this would probably be something that would really help me if I felt that you yourself determines your identity, because everybody else just saw him as a nose, but he saw himself for something much bigger and much more complex, right? So this would be a great resource. And so I would click on it, and there before me is the short story, The Nose. So I would read it, and then I would decide what piece of this proves that the narrator, the man himself, or sorry, it's not the narrator, but the protagonist of the story, the guy whose nose changes, the major, would actually be determining his own identity. And there I have some really strong evidence. So this is a piece of evidence from literature. Now, when you're compiling your evidence, if you're using anything that you found online, you found in a book, you found in an article, you do want to cite it. And there's another video about citing your sources and avoiding plagiarism, but we won't tackle that today. The point is just to highlight the power of Common Lit and to emphasize that while you're looking through these resources, if you find one that you like, so let's say I liked Gogol, or let's say, I like this, I like the idea of Freud. Freud seems like he would know something about identity since he's so rooted in psychology. I'm going to read through this and, I ended up really liking it. And I think Freud could be one of my examples for why I believe what I believe about identity. Just make sure you take your own notes. So I recommend you open up a Google Doc, you title it research notes for, and then whatever your topic is for your argumentative essay, you write down your sources. So if I go back to the Common Lit site, I see it's Freud's theory of the id, ego, and superego. So I would write that down. Freud's theory of the id, ego, and superego as the title of the document. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you see the copyright information. I see that it was published in 2015 and that there isn't necessarily an author. It says by Common Lit staff. So there is no author for it, but I can put the date of, so I put Common Lit staff and then I put 2015. That gives me all the information that I want for my work cited so that I can cite it properly. And I also want to make sure I have the date that I accessed it as well. And then I'm just going to put notes. As I'm reading, I want to jot down things that stand out to me that speak to identity. Okay, there is an annotation tool within Common Lit that you can use, or you can just read a paragraph, decide what stands out to you, and type it in your notes. But the goal is for you to have an ability to interpret what's before you into your own words as much as you can. We don't want to be in a copy paste society. So we don't want to just take this and go, ooh, I like this paragraph. I'm going to paste that in my notes, because then it gets us further and further away from us thinking for ourselves, synthesizing information for ourselves, and producing our own writing. So just make sure you're reading it and then thinking about it and taking notes. And you don't have to go too in depth here. Remember, this is heavily an argumentative essay, not heavily a research essay. The research is just used to prove your argument. So as much as I can hear from you, the better. The more I can hear from you, the better. And with that said, I'm just going to recap what we talked about here. So we went to the Common Lit site. I said, open a Google Doc for notes, put in the citation information, write bulleted notes in your own words. I recommend you find 1 to 3 quotations that really stand out from the piece, and then decide, does this document support your position, or does it provide some points that you then could provide a rebuttal for in your essay, and then continue your notes as you move on through documents. For most argumentative essays, there's a limited number of required sources or research, as argumentation is the forefront of the topic. But at the end of the day, I hope you feel more equipped to tackle research for your argumentative writing, and I'll see you next time.